Today, I'm going to be showing you how you can recreate Anti-Mage's Blink from Dota 2 using Unity. Okay, so before we do anything, let's go into Dota 2 and analyze the ability. I'm going to zoom in as much as I can, and I'm just going to blink around a few times. You can see there's a few things going on here. So the most obvious part is we have these petals which are swiveling around. We also have a little puff of smoke, and it's sort of hard to see, but for about a tenth of a second, there's these little beams that are angled upward. So do that a few more times, and you can see the petals last maybe 2 seconds, and they shrink down and disappear. So that's a good place to start. Let's go back into Unity. Under my scene, I'm going to right click, I'm going to go to Effects, hit Particle System, and right off the bat, I'm going to change the duration to 2. I'm going to change the lifetime to match that, so also 2. Start speed 5 seems okay for now. Start size, we'll definitely want to change this, so I'm going to change this to random between two constants. We'll do 0.1 to 1. I would also like to change the start rotation, so I'm just going to change that to random between two constants, 0 to 360. And that all seems pretty good for now. Next, we'll want to change the emission, so we're definitely going to want to change the rate over time to 0. We're going to add a burst, put that at about 75. Zoom out a bit. Okay, it's definitely bursting, but obviously there's still a lot of work to do. I'm going to go to shape, open that up, change this to hemisphere. And before I mess around with this more, I'm just going to scroll back up to the transform here, right click, hit reset. There we go. Scroll back down. I'm going to change its rotation on the X to about 90, so it's pointing downwards, kind of like a Bosu ball, if you know what that is. I'm going to up the radius on this a bit. We'll set that to 1.5. Then I'm going to go to the velocity over lifetime, check that, open this up, and this is where we'll actually add the swivel effect of the petals. So to do that, go to orbital Y, set that to about 3, and there we go. We already have some kind of swivel going on. I'm going to change the offset X to 5, change radial to -1, zoom out a bit. And yeah, it's swiveling around. Obviously, it's still pretty off, but we'll get there. Something I want to point out is if we look at our particles from a 2D viewpoint, when they swivel around, they're either remaining flat or they're simply going downwards. If we go back to our Dota character and I press I, we look at it from a side angle here, and you can see that the petals actually kind of swivel up and then they swivel back down. So it's a fine little detail, but we definitely want to add it. So back in Unity, I'm going to go to velocity over lifetime again, go to linear this time, change this to a curve, click on the X and the Z to deselect them. Then with the Y curve, I'm going to right click, hit add key, drag it upwards in the middle so it's a little bell curve. And that should be moving up slightly now. We'll take the end as well and just move that a little below 0. And I want this to move up a little more so it's more noticeable. You'll notice that the values in the graph are clamped between 1 and -1, so I definitely want to fix that. There's a little trick to this, so if I go back to constant, I'm going to change the y value to 4, then go back to curve, and now you can definitely see these particles moving up and then down. It's moving a little too much for me, so I'm just going to go back to constant. I'm going to change this to 2.5. That looks a bit better to me. Go back to curve, and then I'm also going to move the end part even further down. So 1, -1. Yep, that looks good. Now, there's still a few things left to do with this particle system, but before we move on, let's make our petal sprite so we're not using this boring circular default particle. To do this, I'm going to use Krita, but honestly, the petals are so simple that you could probably use any program you want, even something really simple like Microsoft Paint. I'm going to make this 512 by 512. That should be more than enough. Hit create. Now, an easy way to turn this into a sprite sheet is you can go to view, go to show grid, and you can see we have this grid here. Then on the right, change these to 256 by 256. And there we go, we have 4 little quadrants. I'm just going to be using the default airbrush, but I will change its settings. So go to settings here, and then I'm going to change its fade to 1 on both the horizontal and vertical. Close out of that. I'll change the size to about 28, looks good. use this polygon tool, and I'm just going to start stitching together some random sort of amorphous shapes. Okay, that should be good enough for now. Don't get too hung up on the shapes, especially along the edges here, because they're more or less going to get covered up by the colors that we ultimately put on this. So as long as you have a few shapes that have some variance and they aren't too boring and circular, you should be good. Now before we export this, let's hide our black background. So click this little eye here. Then we can go up to File, hit Export. Obviously you want to choose a PNG. So we'll save that. Then bring it into Unity. Change the texture type to Sprite. Hit Apply. Now I want to use this on a material. So I'm going to right click, hit Create, go to Material, change the shader to Universal Render Pipeline. Particles, Unlit. I'm going to drag the petals onto the base map. Change the surface type to transparent. Let's rename this to petals. And I'm not going to change the color on this right now. I'm going to add it on our particle system. So let's go back to the particle system, scroll down, go to the renderer, and then just drag that in the material slot, play the animation. And yeah, that looks really weird. It's still in the grid pattern. And that is because we need to go to texture sheet animation, check this, and we'll want to make sure we have this grid mode selected. And we're on a 2x2 grid, so I'm going to change this to 2, 2. And it's sort of hard to see, but that brings each particle down to a single sprite, and it's cycling through those sprites right now. But we don't want the sprites to cycle through like it's a flipbook. We just want an individual sprite for each particle. So I'm going to go to this frame over time option. I'm going to change this to constant, and I'm just going to change it to 0. Then I'm also going to change the start frame to random between two constants, and then I'm just going to go 0 to whatever my max frame is. So I'm going to put 4, and that's looking a bit better. Now I want to edit the color on this. We can actually do that on the particle system here. So scroll down, go to our petals material. Then I'm going to change the emission. Check that. I'm going to put it at this dark blue here. And then bump the intensity up to about 2.5. Okay, that's looking more noticeable. Let's play around with a higher of a color, see how that looks. 4. 4.1, it looks okay for now, so I'm going to keep it there. Something else you may have noticed is that these are all currently kind of flat against the camera, while Anti-Mage's petals and actually just real petals would kind of swivel around, right? Like they're getting blown around by the wind. We can fix this pretty easily if we scroll up to rotation over lifetime, open this up, check this box, go to the angular velocity, change this to random between two constants, check separate axes, and I'm going to make the top row all 0. So it's 0, 0, 0. And what I will do with the bottom row is I'm going to put each of these at 720 degrees. This will give each petal a chance to rotate quite a bit before they die out. If we use the value like 360, it still wouldn't look quite right. Now let's change our size over lifetime. So I'm going to check that box, open this up, and similar to our speed, we want a curve that goes up and then back down. So I'm going to select this. I'm going to right click, hit add key, and I'm just going to make a little bell curve here. Cool. And we can see the particles getting a little bit bigger and then shrinking back down. We also want to change the color over lifetime, specifically the alpha, so it kind of fades out. Let's check this, open this up, and then select the top right little tab here, and then just change this alpha to 0. Cool, and that's looking a lot better. And I think it's about time we rename the particle system, so I'm just going to rename this to petals. I'm also going to create an empty called Anti-Mage Blink and drag this under here. Okay, now we can create the smoke. So I'm going to create a new particle system. We'll call this smoke. And we can create a really simple smoke texture pretty quickly in Krita. Now back in Krita, I'm going to create a new file, make it 512 by 512 again. I'm going to change the tool to this sponge thing. It's called water splats, I believe. I'm going to change the brush settings to smoke. So I'm already selected on it, but you want to select smoke if you're following along. And I'm going to make sure my opacity is something like 40 or 39 is good. Maybe change the size a bit. And I'm just going to click and move my mouse around to create a smoke cloud. That should be good enough. Let's hide the black background and then we can export this. Now I'm going to pull that into Unity. Click on it. We can just click Alpha's transparency this time. I'm going to create a new material. Call this smoke. Change it to URP particles on lit. Drag the smoke into the base map. Change this to transparent. Go to the smoke particle system. Let's change the duration to 2 seconds because that's what the petals are at. I'm also going to change the lifetime to 2. We'll change the start speed to about 10. I want to up the start size too. I'll put it at 7.5. And I'm going to modify the start color to be random between 2 colors. And then I'm going to set this to kind of a light gray. And then a almost black but not quite color. Maybe pull that up a bit. There. I'm going to make the first gray a little darker. Scroll down, open up the emission, set it to 0, set it to a burst, put this at say 10, open up the shape. I'm also going to change this to a hemisphere. Let's increase the radius. I'll say it's like 5. Then we want to rotate this so it's on the side, so kind of opposite of our other one. I'll put this at -90. I can probably down the scale a bit, so let's put these each at, I don't know, 2.5 or 0.25 rather. Let's see how this runs with our petals really quick. So under my hierarchy, I can just kind of shift select them and ooh, looks like they're in different spots. So let me reset the spot on both of these. Right click, reset the petals. Then I'm going to click them together. And okay, this looks like it's way too big, but we can fix that later. I'm just going to add the smoke first though. Down under render, I'm going to add the material. So we'll add the smoke material. And we can definitely see the smoke there. Let's compare it to the petals again. Back on the smoke, let's make this fade out. So let's select the color over lifetime. And then I'm just going to change this to, well, I'm going to change the alpha on these. I'll change the first one to about like 110. And then the second one to 0. So that way it disappears. This is good because the smoke should be barely visible and it definitely fades out, but I do want to make that second color a bit darker because if you look back on the blink, there's some gray and some black clouds mixed in there, so let me fix that. Yeah, okay, that's looking better. I also want to give this some rotation, so I'm going to select rotation over lifetime, check that. I'm going to change this to random between 2 constants. We'll select separate axes, and then I only want it to rotate on the Z, so I'm going to put the first one at 0 and the second value at, say, 180. And the reason I only want it on the Z is because if I put it on the X or the Y, it's going to kind of like fold if I motion it like this, and that just looks super weird for the smoke. Same thing with the X. So don't want that. I only want to rotate it on the Z. I also want these to shrink. So I'm going to go to size over lifetime, check this, change this to random between 2 constants, and I'm going to do 0.5 to 3. Click away. Let's play these together. And similar to our petals, I want to give these a little spin. So let's check velocity over lifetime. Open this up. I'm going to set the orbital x to 2. Then even though it's not really that visible, I'd like to change the linear speed on this. So I'm just going to go to curve really quick, deselect X and Z, and then select this middle one again, and then just add a little bell curve kind of similar to what we did before. Cool. I think that looks pretty good. I'm going to scroll up, turn off looping. Then I'm going to select the petals and the smoke and then play these together. I think the radius is definitely way too big, so let's shrink that. With just my smoke selected, I'm going to go to the hemisphere, or the shape rather, and I'm going to change this to say 3. Let's play these together again. Maybe I can downgrade it a bit more. We'll try 1.5. Cool. All right, we're almost done. The last part is the beams, which is the easiest part. Add another particle system, call it beams. Let's change its duration to 0.2 because the beams are very quick. Also change its lifetime to 0.2. Turn off looping. The beams are fast. Let's change the speed to 100. Shrink the size a bit. 0.3 seems good. Then under emission, of course, this is going to be a burst, and the rate over time will be 0. Let's add a burst. I'm going to put this at 20. Then the shape. The cone is in fact the correct shape, but we do want to change its rotation. I'm going to change its Y rotation to -90 or +90 rather, and then just play these all together. And yeah, that's pointing the right way. You want it to be pointing in the direction that the petals are kind of first going. So let's play that again, and yeah, that looks about right. Select the beams again. I'm going to decrease the angle a bit. I'll put it at about 20. Then let's go down to render, open this up, and this is the part that's actually going to stretch the beam. So change this to, or change the render mode to stretched billboard, change its length to 25. Play this, zoom in. Cool, yeah, and we definitely see the beams playing. I'm going to make it a bit longer. We'll do 35. Yeah, that looks good. And I'm going to make a new material for this. So right click, create material, URP, particles, unlit. Change this to transparent. Add a base map. You can just click this circle here and add the default particle. I, of course, want to give this an emission value. So check emission, go to its HDR, give this a blue color. I'm going to make it kind of a lighter, softer blue than our other one. Give it an intensity of about 2. Rename this material to beams. Now go to my beams particle system, scroll down, put it in the material, play all these together. All right, that doesn't look too bad. I do want to give this some level of transparency. So back on the beams, I'm going to go back up to the top, go to the start color, and then change its alpha to something pretty low. We'll do 40 to start. Shift select these, play them together. I think I might edit the color on the beams a bit. So just select beams and then just play around with this until you're happy. I think I'm going to make it a bit softer again. So shift select all these. And I'm pretty happy with that. Now the final thing we need to fix is we need to kind of select all these together so they play kind of in one spot. I'm going to look at it from above by clicking the Y on the gizmo and then just play it. So the beams definitely need to be adjusted. I'm going to select the beams. I'm going to set its position values to 0. They should have been there in the first place. Play these again. Okay, and that looks about right. So I think this is good enough. I'm pretty happy with it as is. But when AM blinks, the smoke kind of is more right on the petals. And since the petals move forward, it doesn't quite match up. So I'm just going to move the smoke forward slightly. We'll do about 4 units. Play all these together. Maybe do a bit more. We'll try 6. Look at it from above again. There's one last thing I'd like to fix with the beams. So if you zoom in on the beams, I'm just going to select it, press F, and play it. You'll notice they're crossing over each other. That's because our radius is way too small. So I'm just going to go down to the radius. I'm going to set it to about 3. Let's play that. That looks better. And then if you remember on the AM blink, it's actually angled upward just slightly. So I'm going to go up on the Z of this and just put it up to about 20 degrees. Look at it from the side. Play all these together. Maybe that angle is too much. I'll put it at 10. That looks better to me. Thank you for following this tutorial, and please leave any feedback you have in the comments.